Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rich Batts. This is my Module 7 data analysis, and I'm going to be doing the data analysis on our Unit 2 tests that my students just completed earlier this week and last week. So here you can see the raw data represented. Unit 2 was on the biochemistry aspect, so we talked about water properties and the macromolecules and carbon more specifically. And so that's kind of relevant, aside from the fact of saying bear with me because some of these scores are pretty low. This is one of the harder tests and hardest topics that we cover throughout the semester. So that's kind of what's going on there. But the way I broke up the raw data was by multiple choice percent that they earned on the multiple choice, the percent earned on the free response, and then the overall percent grade. Keep in mind, multiple choice and free response are not split 50-50. So the overall grade represents how they were distributed within the test, not a 50-50 split between them. And then as you can see, the student number, 1 through 20, there were 20 students in my class that took this test, so that's where that came from there. So one of the reasons I did a recording was to kind of show you zip grade and its potential it has. I know in the module overview, there was Study Island was an option if we use that to use their data and that sort of stuff. But for my tests, I use ZipGrade, and if you haven't heard of ZipGrade, it is marvelous. You get so many free tests a month to scan. I just bought it. It's like $6 for the entire year, and it makes grading go a lot quicker if you use Scantron's multiple choice tests, that sort of stuff. So the way it works is you create your account, you log in, you make your answer key, and then it gives you printout forms where all you do is hold, I have an iPad, you hold your iPad over top of the paper, scan it, it tells you which ones are right, which ones are wrong, and then it can also compile this nice data analysis. You can also tie standards to each question, that way you can go through the analysis and see exactly which students missed the questions depending on which standard it was. I haven't done that yet, but it is a really cool aspect. But as you can see here, if we look at number 1, the answer was D. 19 out of the 20 students answered it correct, which is 95% of them. And then the alternative answer, the rest of the class answered B, which is really nice because then for something along the lines of number 14 there, 25% got it correct, but then A, B, and D all had 20, 25, and 30% of the answers. So it was an even spread between all 4 answers. So maybe that's a question I want to go back and review with my class and make sure that they kind of understand what the question was asking and kind of that overarching topic that correlates with that one. So I would recommend ZipGrade, or at least checking it out. Like I said, you get so many free scans a month, so even try it for the free scans. But it is a really nice tool to be able to use and incorporate. And everything's also directly on your iPad when you're using it as well. But this was kind of the first step in analyzing the data. From here, and this is what I do with every one of my tests, I check this out and see which questions students most struggled with. So if you'll go down the list, you'll notice, question 5, only 55% of the students got it correct, or 14, 25%. And I'll hit those questions more when we're reviewing it, just to make sure that they fully understand kind of what's going on there. So when I analyze the data, this is kind of what I did from it. So notice the first part, the student multiple choice free response overall grade stayed the same. However, 81% of the test was due to the multiple choice. There were 35 questions. And then free response was only 19% of the test. So that adds up to 100% of the possible points, 19% coming from free response, 81% from the multiple choice. So that's where those percents came from, and then the overall grade percent is right there as well. So I wanted to take the average of them. So my multiple choice average was a 75%. Free response was a 63, and then overall grade was a 73. So the overall grade kind of goes right in line. It is a harder test, like I said, so 73 isn't bad. The kind of scary part is the 63% in the free response, which I'll get to in just a moment. Over in the fourth column there, the average multiple choice and free response there, that's just taking those two averages as if it was a 50-50 split, how their grade would have been impacted. So then all the way on the right there, I took just the multiple choice column and found the mean, median, and mode, along with the min and the max. So my mean was a 75%, my median was a 82, and the mode was an 83, which is good because that kind of shows that, multiple choice students did pretty well. Majority of the class obviously did pretty well. We have an 83 as the mode, 82 as the median, which just that 75 kind of represents telling me that there were a couple outliers down below who brought that average down a little bit. Which the minimum there is a 34, so that one, excluding that, might have brought that average up to closer to an 80, closer to an 82 there. And the max, that 97, is really good. That means they only missed one, maybe two questions, so that I know is good. And then, obviously, if I had the students' names here, I'd be able to see which student correlated with which. Free response, kind of the same thing. Notice that my lowest grade was a 6, and this isn't out of anything, it's out of 100. So they got a 6% on the free response. So now that might be the student that I want to go to and look and say, hey, what's going on? See if it's the same student who had the low multiple choice questions. So that's a way to kind of analyze it. And then finally, the overall grade, the mean and median right around the same, and then the mode, 53 was much lower, along with the minimum being of a 36. And then one thing you'll notice is that standard deviation there. So I have a very high standard deviation. I have 15.8, just about 16 for my standard deviation. So that, along with what I was just previously saying about the mean being a little bit lower than my median mode, kind of tells me that, the students maybe, there's a couple outliers that help bring that grade down much more than where it should be. So that average isn't a direct representation of the entire class. Maybe their average is a little bit higher, and that deviation might go a little bit lower if we got rid of those outliers. So that was kind of my analysis interpretation there. And then I also just kind of made a bar graph for the number of students per percent. So at our school, 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 89 is a B, 70 to 79 is a C, 65 to 69 is a C, or a D rather, and then 64 and below is failing. So from the test, 4 students had A's, 5 had B's, 4 had C's, 1 had a D, and then 6 failed the test. Typically, you want to see a nicer bell curve there. The top 3 there had a bell curve, and then there were, like I said, probably a couple outliers down there at the failing mark that brought that average down dramatically. So kind of going into those analysis questions, what was going on? What does this study say about student learning? So if I go back, I think it kind of states that, multiple choice, 75% of the class was the average, compared to the 63% on the free response. So I think that helps say that students are better at multiple choice. Just quite frankly, they're better at multiple choice. That's what they grew up doing. Maybe they're getting better at being able to identify and eliminate wrong answers. But one thing that worries me is that low free response tells me that students aren't fully learning the material. They're more or less memorizing it for the multiple choice, and then when it comes to applying it, it's hurting them in the free response. They're not fully grasping the concepts that are going on and how to relate them to real world situations and application of the information that they learned. Question 2 about my teaching. I think this helps show me that I do need to focus more on ways to help them learn the material as opposed to just memorizing it and regurgitating it. And I think that kind of correlates with my project because, or my research plan rather, because I'm going to use manipulatives to try and help students learn and interact and be able to relate real world situations to it as opposed to just memorizing and then forgetting, which is kind of what this data suggests. And then finally, what would I do differently to improve student performance? Well, like I just said, I'd like to add the manipulative aspect of it and add more hands-on things that are going to help them fully understand what is happening and why it's happening. One of the major aspects is the macromolecules from this unit, which students did fairly poor on. if I could go back and analyze the entire test, I would probably split it up based on sections. So based on water properties, based on macromolecules, based on carbon, and see which of those sections hurt them the most. And I can almost guarantee that it would have been the macromolecules, just due to the amount of information and how hard it is to relate those to real-world aspects for the students. So overall, I think what would I do differently? Incorporate more hands-on things, more ways for them to be involved and actually connect with the material. That way they're not just memorizing it, they're actually learning it and able to apply it to everything else in everyday situations. So that was my data analysis. If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave the comments. Hopefully I touched on everything that I needed to. I was a little tripped up on how far in depth to go with the data, but hopefully this was sufficient. So again, if you guys have any questions or comments and ways to make it better, please let me know. Aside from that, thank you and have a great day.